This basketball has no air, and it's the future of the NBA, and I had the chance to be one of the first people to dribble it. But first, I'm sure you're wondering, why do we even need an airless basketball in the first place? Well, that's the question I flew out to Chicago to ask this guy. This is Dr. Dave Krasminski, who works with companies like Wilson on how they can best use 3D printing for their own innovations. And he showed me around the largest 3D printing conference in North America so I could better understand why a 3D printed basketball is so important. And that started with me getting my hands on some insane 3D printed pieces of sports equipment, including shoes, shin guards, and even a hockey helmet. All things that are currently being mass produced today. In fact, this hockey helmet is actually a collaboration with Bauer, called the Bauer React, where for just $550, you can go into a store and have your head shape scanned by an iPad, and then get a helmet custom made to the exact specifications of your head shape and size, making them far safer, lighter, and more breathable than the hockey helmets that have been used for decades. I even saw this 3D printing technology utilized in baseball and motorcycle helmets, where the padding was made entirely out of this 3D printed material that can be made to order with a whole range of materials and rigidity. But at the end of the day, I was here for the ball and answer the one question on everyone's mind. How does it bounce? Well, before I answer that, let's back up, because a lot of people are confused about why this ball even exists in the first place. But what many people fail to realize is that for decades, the basketball has taken on all different shapes and sizes, from being made out of genuine leather to even having laces. I mean, basketball was originally played with a soccer ball, and as recently as the 2021 season, the NBA switched the balls they were using from Spalding to Wilson, which caused players like Paul George to talk about how the Wilson balls didn't have the same touch or softness the Spalding balls had. And he might have been onto something, as the next season immediately following the switch, the league average shooting percentage was down a considerable margin, with players shooting the lowest three-point percentage the league had seen since 1998. So changing the way the basketball looks, feels, and performs really isn't anything new. But isn't it a little ridiculous to go from this to this? Well, Dr. Krasminski mentioned that this sort of drastic change is sort of the point.
This is somewhat limiting. This is one material made on one system, and the complexity here is up to you.
So this Wilson prototype with a matte black finish and holes is just another iteration in the journey of evolving the basketball. But how close is it to actually being used in the NBA, and when are we going to finally be able to buy one? Well, let's start with the first question, because in the middle of watching this year's dunk contest, you might have all of a sudden noticed that something was off about Kenyon Martin Jr.'s second dunk. The ball he used wasn't your typical basketball. This was the black airless basketball, marking the first time it had been seen or used on the public stage. And this ball wasn't just some gimmick, it was a top secret project years in the making. After all, it's no easy task to reinvent the basketball, although that was the precise directive given to Wilson's innovation manager, Dr. Nadine Lipa, who worked in tandem with a company called EOS, that's who Dr. Dave Krasminski works for, that normally prints the parts for rocket ships and medical devices. And even with such a qualified team, reinventing the basketball proved to be an uphill battle. As Lipa and her team would soon find out, doing the impossible doesn't happen overnight. The materials with high energy return were often not durable enough for our application, Lipa says. The adequate method-mechanical material combination that bounced like a basketball was elusive to the team, and there were so many additive technologies to sift through and understand. It took us several years to find the right combinations. But despite many roadblocks along the way, Lipa and her team worked tirelessly to produce Wilson's 3D airless basketball prototype, because they wanted to create an airless basketball that bounced and felt like a normal leather ball, a goal which wouldn't have been possible without additive manufacturing, which is essentially a kind of 3D printing that can build precise geometric shapes like spheres by printing in 2D layers. These 2D layers are basically etch-a-sketched onto white powder, allowing for the perfect ball to be created every time. Now, technically speaking, the ball is made from an elastomeric polymer, which allows it to maintain its structure while also featuring a see-through lattice structure with hexagonal holes that allow air to pass through it. And after this design process was complete, it was just a matter of testing the ball to make sure it actually worked. There was just one problem. The team at Wilson and EOS was only given about a 60-day heads up that the ball would be used in the 2023 NBA dunk contest. So Wilson sent the ball to a basketball testing facility for quote rigorous testing, which even included hitting it with a baseball bat. Yet that alone wasn't enough, because if the ball was going to be used in the actual dunk contest, Wilson also needed to make sure it gained approval from those who mattered the most, NBA players. So Lipa and her team traveled to an NBA practice facility to let an unnamed team give it a shot. Everyone's tired and sweating, Lipa says, and we said, oh, can we just have 5 minutes of your time after practice to take a look at this ball, give us some feedback? And their faces changed from, I'm tired at the end of my tough practice, to being like little kids. But while the idea of an airless basketball is cool and all, do NBA players actually like it? Well, Lipa continues. One player in particular seemed like he was having a really tough practice that day, but when I bounced past it to him and he caught the ball in his hands, he looked up at me like, what is this? And then he couldn't stop playing with it. So if nothing else, it's a promising sign that NBA players are experimenting experimenting with it and willing to give it a shot. That being said, there is one NBA player who got to experiment with the ball more than anyone else, Kenyon Martin Jr. After all, Martin was the NBA player who introduced the ball to the public during the 2023 dunk contest. So naturally, this meant he got a first-hand look at it beforehand as well. But getting an airless basketball to Kenyon Martin wasn't as easy as it seemed, because this wasn't just a trial, he was using it for the dunk contest in front of millions. So as a result, Wilson spent the remainder of their 60 days perfecting the basketball. And in the 2 months leading up to the dunk contest, they, in partnership with the OS, printed a basketball almost every single day, making sure that by the time the basketball reached Martin's hands, it was their best version yet. Here's what Martin said about the experience. When I first heard it, I didn't know what to expect. Once I actually saw the ball in person, it was crazy. I didn't expect a basketball with holes to bounce and feel like a normal leather basketball. But Martin doesn't just stop there. He also talks about the positive implications of this basketball in the future, stating, "You don't have to worry about using it outside. You don't have to worry about it popping or deflating." Now, Martin raises a really good point, because if this was just like any other basketball, then it wouldn't be useful or needed. However, this unique design offers a lot of advantages that other basketballs don't have, such as less wear and tear. But avoiding wear and tear isn't the only advantage of an airless ball, because it also ensures that every basketball feels and plays the exact same. Now, NBA referees wouldn't have to worry about choosing the perfect ball. Instead, they know each basketball will bounce and perform the same. This makes a big difference because air pressure in a basketball can drastically change how well players shoot and dribble. So without any air, all of these factors are nullified. In other words, guys like Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and James Harden can no longer blame their off nights on the ball. Yet, it's not just a good fit for the NBA, because the ball is actually a lot more sustainable in general. Compared to today's basketball, it no longer requires leather, multiple manufacturing steps, and it's made from a material that's fully recyclable. I mean, just think about it. This ball starts as a single powder and can be 3D printed in a single day with just one machine. This means you could theoretically order a ball from Wilson, and they could print it and ship it all in the same day without having to store inventory or wait for the ball to be manufactured across the world. And when you're done with it, they could grind the ball back down to a powder and reuse it to make another ball all over again. But if that's not enough, it's also more grippy, flies truer, and rebounds better. In other words, what's not to love about this basketball? And honestly, I can't name a lot. Besides the holes in the ball that some people just have to get over and some potential shipping problems, this basketball seems to be a new and improved version of what we already have today. But while it seems to be a great solution on paper, I still had some concerns of my own. Fortunately, the team at EOS who printed the airless basketball for Wilson saw my original video on the ball right after the dunk contest and allowed me to be one of the first people to play with it. So I flew to Chicago and met up with the team responsible for making the ball at the largest 3D printing conference in North America. And at last, I got to see the ball in all of its glory. But to make things even better, Dr. Dave Krasminski was there to walk me through the full process of how the ball gets made, all of the machines that are used in the process, and to answer any questions about the ball that popped into my head. And after learning about the crazy applications this technology can have in sports, there was just one thing left for me to do: try it out myself. Now, NBA players weren't the only ones acting like little kids. I was too. But the million-dollar question still remained. How does this thing bounce? And surprisingly, the answer is just like a normal ball. It doesn't feel any lighter or less bouncy than the NBA balls used today. So despite my initial concerns, this basketball passed the test with flying colors. That being said, it could still be a while until we see this ball being used in the NBA. And the team at EOS told me that mass production is still years away, since neither they nor Wilson has built up the production scale required to pump these things out. But don't lose hope, because sometimes the best things in life take time. So if the ball is really as good as I say it is, it's only fitting that we'll have to wait. But in the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more long-form sports business content in the future. Speaking of which, if you want to learn what happens when two of the world's biggest celebrities take over a struggling football club, make sure to check out my previous video about Wrexham FC. I'll see you guys there.